It is bright and early here in Vancouver, and I'm kinda tired, because, it's early. However, we had ourselves some things that I just had to go over from Elliotte Friedman, of all people. And I say, of all people, as if Elliotte Friedman is not one of the more renowned NHL insiders, but the reason I say, of all people, is because, Friedman buddy, didn't you just go out there and say you're gonna stop talking about the Canucks? Yeah, okay. Maybe the temporary Vancouver suspension for Friedman was a lot more temporary than we would have believed, but earlier today we had ourselves Elliotte Friedman on 32 Thoughts speaking out about the Vancouver Canucks once again. I wanted to dive into what he had to say about JT Miller, and I also wanted to get into some comments made by Rick Dhaliwal yesterday on Real Kipper and Bourne as to the extended notes about the Miller drama and how things could have been prevented. This is damage control here, people. So, let's go over onto Buck Foston's Twitter account because they tweeted out some of the things that Friedman spoke about in regards to JT. Firstly, he thinks that JT Miller has not asked for a trade, but he does think that JT would consider it if it were presented to him. But management has got to go to him. And this does align with some of the other ideas we've heard from different NHL insiders the past few days, that JT and his family, they're committed to Vancouver, they like it here, they like the environment, they want to grow up here, or Miller doesn't want to grow up here, he's already 30, but his kids, they like it here. So obviously, JT isn't really in a position to ask for some sort of a trade. He's scoring points. The team might suck a little bit, but he's in a position, life-wise, location-wise, and career-wise, where he's accomplishing a lot of good things right now. Unless he really decides, hey, I want to win a Stanley Cup, and it's not going to happen here in Vancouver, and then he decides to relocate his entire family a la Ryan Kesler. Unless that happens, there probably isn't any stock to the idea that JT could be asking for a trade himself. If anything, I think it'd be more likely that Elias Pettersson asks for a trade if you consider all the factors we know about the Miller-Petey situation and what Pettersson's personality is like as well. But of course, you don't want to see that out of an $11.4 million guy. JT, however, being the forefront of all of this antagonistic commentary from Vancouver social media and insiders, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, but ultimately Friedman is saying, yeah, no, he wants to stay in Vancouver. He's committed here. He hasn't asked for a trade, although because of the drama, because of all of the context surrounding the team, if he were to get asked about a trade, he would consider it. He does have trade protection after all, so even if the Canucks wanted to trade him, he would have to say okay to it as well. Anyways, Friedman does go out there and talk about some destinations. I do know the Rangers are interested, but I don't know how easy that match is going to be. If the Vancouver Canucks wanted Mika Zibanejad, that would have been done already. The guy I could see the Vancouver Canucks really liking is Braden Schneider. However, I'm convinced the Rangers would not do that. And here's the thing, Mika Zibanejad is so bad this season, the guy just does not know how to play hockey, and I say that like he didn't just score a goal yesterday too, but the Rangers have been in a really difficult spot with their development of Mika Zibanejad, and the way he has continued his career from being a 5-goal-in-1-game guy, a 40-goal guy of years past to what he is this season. And by the way, if you can hear the birds outside, I apologize for that. It is bright and early in Vancouver after all. I kind of need to get some protection here from the calls outside. By the way, you know what else is really great about protection? Protection on the internet. And if you have the need of protecting yourself even further whilst browsing in certain ways, ExpressVPN, it's the first link in the description. You can go out there and click it. It helps you out, it helps me out, everybody wins, and you get yourselves the VPN that you need for a very special discount too. Use that link in the description. But anyways, going back over onto the Miller talk, New York, it's going to be tough to get Mika Zibanejad off on any sort of move because his reputation has gone down the drain significantly the past year and a bit. I say that like he isn't on pace for 50 points again this season, but still, there are a bunch of guys around the NHL that just because you can produce points doesn't necessarily mean you're producing points to the same level that is expected out of you. Mika Zibanejad has gone through a really rough stretch as of late. He's only got 2 points in his last 10 games, and a lot of Rangers fans have been so critical of him, almost in a more extreme way that Canucks fans have been critical of Elias Pettersson from last year into this year. Now, I get it, there's a lot more to like out of Elias Pettersson's game when he's not scoring versus Mika Zibanejad. But that's just kind of to illustrate the point here, how bad things have been. So if Miller was the target and Zibanejad was the return, if Vancouver was okay with that, yeah, Friedman's right. That trade would have been done yesterday. It would have been done 2 weeks ago. But Vancouver would not want to settle for a guy like Mika Zibanejad. Anyways, he does go out there and talk about Braden Schneider, who is a name that I think we have talked about before too in some sort of a Vancouver, I think it was a Miller trade conversation. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Like last year, or was it, no, 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, when Miller was on the trade block, a lot of people were talking about the Rangers. Braden Schneider was the name that a lot of Canucks fans wanted to see get thrown back to Vancouver in return, but not. The Rangers did not want to depart with that asset. Right-handed D-man, a big guy. He's a solid, young defenseman. Lots to like out of Braden Schneider, but it's very, very obvious why the Rangers would not want to give him up. Anyways, let's go over onto another team that Friedman talks about in regards to a potential Miller trade. I'm thinking about it off the top of my head. It's Chicago. If I'm Chicago and that JT Miller talk is real, that's the guy I'm going after. And, you know what I will say? Connor Bedard, he might have some sort of an affinity for JT Miller. I mean, the guy was 15 when the Canucks made the bubble playoffs in the second round, right? So, Bedard playing with JT Miller? Oh, imagine that kind of leadership in the locker room there, too. Tyler Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, Seth Jones, JT Miller. Lots to go out there and like in that Blackhawks room, and with Connor Bedard being the guy to potentially earn more, work ethic-wise, demand-wise, from a player like JT sitting next to his stall. Obviously, that's a dynamic that I think would be pretty ridiculous, but I do kind of wonder if JT gets traded to a team like Chicago, what goes back to Vancouver? You're obviously not trading Miller for Bedard. Like, that's not going to happen. You're keeping Bedard if you're Chicago under any circumstance. But what prospects are on the table? Like a Frank Nazar, for example? I mean, he's been pretty good lately. I would like to see Vancouver try to take a swing on him. Any right-handed defensemen available? I mean, Artyom Levshunov was just drafted as well, so if the Canucks need defensive help, is he a guy that they turn to? There are also other names that could be seen as desirable in the Blackhawks prospect pool. It is pretty deep after all. Lucas Reichel is a young guy. I am a fan of Colton Dach. He's making his NHL debut later today. There's a lot to be interested in when it comes to Vancouver and Chicago. But what I wanted to also dive into to end off this video was a tweet made by Taj, which summarizes some comments made by Rick Dhaliwal from yesterday's Kipper and Board. This goes back over to the Miller-Pettersson drama, and Dhaliwal goes out there and labels a name that might have actually been able to prevent this. Rick Dhaliwal says, if Chris Tanev never left Vancouver, he would have not let this Miller-Pettersson thing last as long as it has. I wonder a similar thing about Luke Schenn to a lesser extent. Basically, anyone that has enough status to tell Miller to shut the F up. And that, I think, is a really interesting idea. Firstly, the fact that Dhaliwal even mentions Tanev, Chris Tanman as the name that would have been able to step into the locker room and be like, yeah, no, sorry guys, break this up, stop it. Stop it, Miller, you gotta stop that. It's almost similar to what we had seen out of Brad Richardson, where a few days ago he said that he told Miller, you gotta lay it down a little bit. You gotta back off on Elias Pettersson because you're too hard on the guy. If Chris Tanev was in that locker room from 2021 to 2023 to 2024, whatever, because you gotta remember, Elias Pettersson, he only played 2 years with Chris Tanev in the room. Chris Tanev left after the 2020 bubble season, after all. If Chris Tanev was there longer term, it does kind of speak volumes to me as an outside consumer of the hockey product that Chris Tanev's status in that locker room would have been so strong that he would have been able to make this thing calm down. No, it's not Bo Horvat. No, it's not Quinn Hughes. No, it's not any of the other alternate captains we have seen. It's not Myers. It's not Brock. It's not any of those other guys that would have been able to calm this P.D. Miller thing down. It would have been Chris Tanev and maybe even Luke Schenn, because you got to remember Schenn did get into it with Miller earlier a few years ago too. yelling, screaming match going on over there. Who knows, maybe Miller called Schenn a baby like he did Pettersson, but either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this Miller talk, the Rangers, the Blackhawks. What are your thoughts about him not requesting a trade, and what are your thoughts on Chris Tanev potentially being the mediating force that could have held everything down? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.